Hello and welcome to Crime Report. Coming up tonight, who killed two whippet breeders in a quiet country village? What's the link between the mysterious deaths of 4 prostitutes in one city? Plus the thieves who target exotic birds worth tens of thousands of pounds each. But first, police are still investigating the deaths of 7 people at this house in East London over the weekend, killed in one of the worst arson attacks in years. A petrol can was found near the back door, but who started the fire is a mystery. It was just before 1 o'clock on Saturday morning when neighbours heard screaming from number 15 Bellamy Close.
All I could hear was the babies coughing and crying. And then we ran outside, and then Dave next door got the ladders off of his car, put them up the back, but no one could get to the babies or anything because the fire was just gushing out of the windows and the windows just smashed through.
One of the first people on the scene was Kelly Himpfen, the mother of 3 children trapped inside. She'd split up from the children's father, Lee Day, but lives locally. 4-year-old twins Madison and Rhiannon Day were among the 7 people who died in the blaze. Also killed was the twins' 2-year-old brother Reese, the children's 22-year-old father Lee, his 16-year-old girlfriend of 2 days Yvonne, the children's grandmother Sandra and great-grandmother Kathleen. The bodies have yet to be positively identified. Neighbours managed to free one man from the blaze, the children's grandfather, Brian Day.
Gone round the back to try and get up to the back window because that's where Dave over the road thought the kids were. The ladder wouldn't reach, so we've gone back round the front with the ladders. This was before the fire brigade got there. We've put the ladder up to the first floor window, and that's where Lee's dad was, and he managed to get out.
By the time the fire brigade arrived, the fire had engulfed the entire building, giving them little chance of rescuing the occupants. Forensic experts took away a plastic petrol can from the house, evidence that the fire was started deliberately. The question is, who would carry out such an attack on this well-liked family? Neighbours are baffled.
To me, you never know enemies. To me, I don't really, I ain't got a clue. It's just amazing.
3 innocent babies, well, 7 innocent victims, if you like. 3 little babies. Who could do such a thing and who could live with it?
When you hear things like this, you just don't know who would do it.
One neighbour reveals how the family had a party earlier that night. Did a quarrel take place at this get-together and lead to the attack? This is one of several lines of inquiry the police are following. One source told Crime Report that police are also planning to question ex-lovers of some of the victims. Could this tragedy have been prompted by a love feud? In a fresh move today, police are examining video footage at all local garage forecourts to see if the arsonist was recorded buying petrol. Neighbours say whoever started this fire knew they were risking the lives of 3 children.
We all know those kids were there. Whoever done this knew the kids were in the house. Because the kids stayed there every weekend with their grandparents.
In a bid to figure out the motive behind this attack, police are talking to anyone who knew the family. Somebody made an enemy. Police are determined to find out who that is.
We always need your help in situations such as these. We can't properly conduct our investigations without help. This is a horrendous attack on innocents.
Latest figures reveal there are almost 80,000 malicious fires every year. That's 50% of all reported fires. In 1997, 110 people died and 3,000 were injured in arson attacks. Worryingly, domestic targets are rising.
We're seeing more attacks, people committing arson against neighbours for racial reasons, purely for the fun of it. And so there are literally tens of thousands of cases every year of ordinary homes being set on fire.
On Sunday, neighbours prayed for the dead. The scars from this crime are likely to stay with the community for many years. Here in the heart of rural Norfolk, a reward of up to £25,000, thought to be one of the biggest ever, is being offered by police who are baffled by the murders of two whippet breeders, a 79-year-old woman and her daughter. Late on Sunday morning, the 10th of January this year, Norfolk police were called to this isolated cottage a mile from the fenland village of Upwell. Inside, they found the bodies of 79-year-old Connie Sheridan and her 45-year-old daughter, Janice.
Both ladies have sustained a number of stab wounds to their bodies, and it's a very brutal murder to two defenceless ladies in their own home.
Janice Sheridan was last seen alive in the village on the Thursday afternoon, but detectives believe she and her mother could have been murdered any time between then and Sunday morning.
Almost certainly they weren't killed on the Sunday, but it's a fairly inexact science, time of death, and we really don't know whether they were killed Thursday or Friday or even early into Saturday.
The double murder is a mystery. There was no sign of a break-in, no sign of a struggle, nothing was stolen. There was no sign of a sexual attack. Despite intensive searches, the murder weapon, a heavy 6-inch knife, has not been found. It's a crime with no apparent motive. There are no real suspects. For Norfolk police, it's a huge murder hunt. 70 officers have logged and collated more than 1,100 statements. Detectives are convinced the key to cracking this crime lies in finding out more about the Sheridans' private lives. But it's proving difficult. Sylvie Flatt employed Janice Sheridan at her kennels for 5 years and knew her as well as anyone. Police wonder whether Janice had a secret lover.
She was a very private person. She had no boyfriends that I knew of and not many close friends. She just totally loved dogs. That was her whole life. I cannot think of one reason why anyone would want to kill Jan.
Could the killer or killers have come from the whippet world? The Sheridans were well known, keeping more than 20 dogs in kennels. They would regularly travel to show them around the country. One dog is due to be exhibited at Crufts later this week. Police haven't ruled it out, but fellow breeders can't believe that Janice and her mother were killed out of professional jealousy.
Whippets as a breed don't really fetch big money, and unless you're really at the top, you're not looking at the sort of money that's going to cause people to do any harm to you in order to get hold of your dogs.
Morning everybody, welcome to the Thursday morning briefing in relation to the Sheridan murders.
Detectives have one positive lead so far, the sighting of a vehicle near the murder scene. They're anxious to trace this vehicle, but they need to know more. The description's incomplete and the reported registration number has never been issued.
The number of that vehicle was recorded or remembered by the witness as G567PVF.
The lack of a known motive means that every line of inquiry has to be pursued. New information, police believe, could come from anglers who travelled from all over the country to catch pike in Norfolk's waterways. Janice Sheridan was seen here with her whippets on the Thursday. Was she with someone?
That information may be that tiny piece of this jigsaw we're trying to build in relation to the lives of Janice and Connie.
2 months after this apparently motiveless crime, detectives are still looking for a significant breakthrough. They're hoping the £25,000 reward will help solve the mystery of the Whippet murders. Locals desperately want them to succeed.
I'll always want to know who killed her and why, and who would ever want to hurt Jan.
In the meantime, the Sheridans' beloved Whippets are being looked after in kennels. The only witnesses to a brutal double murder, sadly, don't talk. After the break, the link between the killings of 4 prostitutes and the thieves who target exotic birds. A 35-year-old man from Hull is beginning a prison sentence after brutally killing his prostitute girlfriend because she refused to go out to earn money for heroin. But as Kent Barker reports, that's just one of a series of mysterious deaths of prostitutes in that city.
Police patrol the red light district of Hull in unmarked cars. They may have ruled out a Ripper-style serial killer, but 4 suspicious deaths of prostitutes in as many years is 4 too many. Tonight, few hookers have ventured out into the cold. They say punters have been staying away in droves since the grisly killings and increased police activity.
It's quiet, very quiet. There's hardly anything. It's just dead.
The death of any friend is bad enough, but the fate of the most recent prostitute to die, Natalie Clubb, murdered, dismembered and dumped, has appalled those who knew her.
It was such a shame. She was a real nice girl. She come to Hull to get away from her husband, basically. She met someone on heroin. Before she knew it, he had her on the heroin and on the streets.
I knew her about 3 months before she got killed. She was a nice enough lass. She was all right. She kept herself to herself most of the time. I think it was one of the punters that did it. Shouldn't have left her like that.
The decaying parts of Natalie's body were left here, in a weed tip by a pumping station just outside Hull. Chief Inspector Paul Davison launched the investigation last July after a dog uncovered an arm in a black bag.
Because of the tattoo chaos on the arm, we had a missing person, Natalie Clubb, who had chaos tattooed on her arm. We thought that possibly it was Natalie Clubb. From there, we started on the right-hand side of the weed heap, and we found the head of a female, and we did some post-mortems that very night. The next day, we found the torso in one piece, in triple bagged, and some parts of Natalie's legs, and we're still missing from the knee down on both legs and the left arm.
Police brought in a forensic archaeologist to sift through the weed pile.
His job was really to supervise the excavation of the remaining body parts from the weed heap, because we were looking for things like maggot casts, which would maybe date when the body was dumped there, and it would also tell us whether, crucially, somebody dug a shallow grave for the body parts.
But it soon seemed likely that Natalie's killers hadn't put her bagged-up body on the weed heap at all. Police now believe the bin liners floated down the canal and were scooped out, along with other rubbish, during regular cleaning of the pump filters.
I think that they possibly were put in thinking that the body parts would end up in the massive pumps, grind it into pulp and then end up in the River Humber. The perfect murder. There'd be no body parts left.
So where was Natalie's body dumped? 2 miles upstream from the pumping station is a pull-in off the road. Did the killer drive here one night and toss the black bags down the bank and into the water? Police know she was an addict, but what part, if any, did drugs play in her murder? Certainly it was heroin that caused the mysterious death of another Hull prostitute, Hayley Morgan, in 1997, almost exactly a year before Natalie went missing.
So we're about a mile and a half from the city centre of Hull.
Detective Chief Inspector Rick Monkman was brought in to head a murder investigation.
She'd been unceremoniously dumped on the alleyway, just to one side behind a tree. And she was partly clothed. We actually found her with a carrier bag over her head.
But despite the suspicious circumstances, the post-mortem showed Hayley had died from a massive overdose of heroin.
Now that changed quite dramatically the circumstances of the inquiry, insofar that we were now told that she almost certainly wasn't murdered, but had died as a result of a drugs overdose.
But if she wasn't killed, police can't explain why anyone would conceal and dump her body, itself a serious offence. Hayley almost certainly died 2 days before she was found. So what had happened in that missing 48 hours? Marks on her body suggest she'd been in a confined space. So is it possible her corpse was here at her flat all the time, perhaps hidden in a cupboard or wardrobe? If so, who drove her to the alley? Why was she only partially clothed? And was that huge heroin overdose really self-inflicted? Or could it have been administered by someone else? Police hope that a coroner's inquest may provide some answers. Hull police have had some success in unravelling 2 of the other prostitute killings. Karen Tomlinson was the first to die back in 1996. Last month, her boyfriend, a 35-year-old heroin user, Stephen Price, was jailed for 10 years for her manslaughter. In 1997, the body of a second Hull prostitute was discovered floating in the Humber. She was Samantha Class. A man has been charged with her murder. There may be no one single perpetrator, but there is a common thread: heroin, itself a serial killer. Prostitutes say it makes them take terrible risks and reduces daily life to a blur.
One night over the weekend, 2 lasses were attacked. At the end of the day, we are vulnerable, aren't we, you know?
I know I'm all right on the streets, there's people watching me, but still we have to go off on cars and that, down the alleys.
It's the same thing every day. Go up, drugs, get ready, go to work. Go home, go to bed. Go up, drugs. It's the same every day.
7 months after Natalie Clubb's dismembered body was found, there are still some 30 officers working full-time on the case, and there are still major questions to be answered.
I know how she was killed, and she was murdered. She met with a brutal death. I'm absolutely certain of that, and I'm not going to say how she died for obvious reasons. I've got an open mind where she was killed and where she was actually dismembered.
This is where Natalie lived until she disappeared, 2 months before her body was uncovered at the pumping station. The forensic bill for the investigation already tops £80,000, yet police still can't say with absolute certainty whether she was killed here. They believe her body was dismembered with a hacksaw by someone who knew what they were doing. But who, and when, and where? Natalie was heavily into heroin. Police believe she would often rob clients to buy an extra fix, but they still can't prove if it was an angry punter, an irate dealer, or a fellow addict who butchered her.
This macaw, worth £2,000, was stolen from this pet shop in South London last September. Happily, Rowley here was found within hours, but most stolen birds aren't. And as Sharon Doughty now reports, the theft and smuggling of exotic birds is now a criminal industry worth millions of pounds each year.
The job of this team at Heathrow Airport is to examine every consignment of birds flown into the UK. They're looking for endangered species being exported illegally. There's an international treaty to protect rare breeds from extinction. Even so, the smugglers have built an illegal trade in wildlife worth around £3 billion a year worldwide.
Eleanor's falcon.
This Eleanor's falcon is one of 13 birds seized in a police raid on a Bedfordshire breeder. The birds were smuggled into Britain as eggs by Paul Noble, and police were able to prove he travelled to Mallorca to steal them from nests. He was jailed for 8 months. The rare and protected species fully grown is worth around £1,000 a bird. Noble was smuggling the eggs through customs in socks specially stuffed with cotton wool.
Here's an Eleanor's falcon's egg. It actually fits nicely inside the packing. Now these were in a drawer right next to the flight tickets and bits and pieces. He'd been to the area of an Eleanor's falcon colony. He'd taken with him climbing equipment which would have been necessary to scale the cliffs.
Police matched soil found on the climbing equipment with samples from the falcon's colony in a remote part of Mallorca. Ironically, the anti-smuggling laws designed to protect birds from extinction have helped to fuel other crimes. By reducing the number of birds on the market, they've pushed up their value and made them a much more tempting target for thieves. Ferdinand here, a blue-fronted Amazon who's getting on for 60 years old and has seen 3 generations of one family, was stolen from a home in South London. Thieves grabbed him and his mate Isabella from the garage while they were getting some fresh air. His owner was so devastated she put out 1,500 posters around the area and was eventually contacted by someone who said he'd bought her birds from a man in a pub.
Finally, I had a phone call from the person who thought he must have bought them, and he brought them back for me. He's right. And we were very pleased to see you, weren't we, Ferdy?
But not all stories have such a happy ending. Generally, the people who steal exotic birds know exactly what they're looking for. In this pet shop, a man and a young boy walked straight past these budgerigars sold at £12 each and headed for a Hans macaw valued at £500.
The boy distracted a member of staff around the other side of the shop, and he just literally grabbed the bird, took it out of the cage, under his jacket, went to run out the shop. One of their members of staff heard the bird squawk and chased them across the road to where there was a car waiting.
When the member of staff tried to stop them, they attempted to run her over and they escaped with the bird. Exotic birds are one of the specialities of Gatwick Zoo. The collection is worth almost £250,000. The rarest type of macaw are worth up to £40,000 each. In the last year, the zoo's had 2 break-ins.
Last year we had 2 cockatoos and 2 Amazon parrots stolen. The Amazon parrots, obviously if you lose a breeding pair of birds, then you've lost your future offspring and it sets you back.
Last year, £80,000 worth of birds were stolen in Britain alone. Most are thought to end up with private collectors overseas.
The birds are stolen to order, without little doubt at all. Very few of them, in fact, ever surface again in this country. And what concerns us, very similar to the theft of arts and antiques, that it is in fact organised crime.
It's not just in order to recognise the most valuable breeds that the thieves need to be experts.
Generally they're stolen in the middle of the night, and you've got to know what you're doing, because certainly the bigger parrots and macaws are quite capable of going through a finger quite easily. They'll go through a Brazil nut like butter.
The other bonus for criminals is that it's very difficult to prove ownership of a bird after it's been stolen, except in very exceptional circumstances.
The bird was in court as an exhibit, and as the owner walked into the court, the bird immediately flashed its eyes and fanned its tail and called her name. So the judge was happy to accept that that was her bird.
Now the zoo's trying to fight back, using the latest technology. All new arrivals, like Willie, are being fitted with a microchip. It's injected just under the skin and it can't be removed. It contains a 10-digit code unique to the bird. The process is relatively painless, and the chip ensures that if the bird is stolen, its details are on a central register. But the chip only helps if the bird is found, and in most of the 600 thefts a year in Britain, the birds are never seen again.
If you have any information about any crime, call Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111.